from the start, when you saw that the Land of Lincoln Goodwill, you may have known this for a while, that they have contracts that are written specifically for workers with severe disabilities. That's how it's written in the contract. And then you saw the actions of Sharon Dermotts to say we're cutting back on on paying those people.
Yeah.
Was it the true intent of that contract in the beginning that work would go to people who would be paid for the work?
Well, that's one reason why I asked for the review of both of the agencies is I would assume so, but I want to know that for certain. We make tough budget choices. There's not an abundance of funding for programs. So when we increase funding for human services, specifically for job training for individuals in Illinois with disabilities, we expect that to go to those individuals. We don't expect it to go to individuals making upwards of $170,000. I mean, I look at it this way. She received, as an executive director of a non-for-profit, granted, we want qualified, good people running organizations like this. I don't discount that at all. But during the height of the budget impasse, she received what appears to be a 30% raise. Her salary is now pushing $170,000 during the height of the budget impasse. And 5 months before a minimum wage is set to increase 4 quarters an hour, that's all, $8.25 to $9.25. She cries foul and says that that's unaffordable. So I look at it in these terms. She is laying off disabled workers. She made the decision to do that to pay for her raise. I can't think of a worse set of circumstances for any organization, let alone one whose mission statement and charge is to train workers, specifically disabled workers.
There are 450 total employees, and she singled out 12 of the 50 who have disabilities.
Yeah.
She could have laid off people in other positions, I suppose.
Yeah.
If it was really that dire, the mission statement on the wall, they raise money on the fact that we protect and help people with disabilities. How would you describe the priorities over there as you see them?
Well, I think that came through with your interview, and when she, as the executive director of a non-for-profit, articulated the plight of Walmart and what the slight adjustment in the minimum wage 5 months from now would mean for Walmart. Walmart posted $14 billion in profits last year, according to what I can see. And she chose to articulate the plight of Walmart rather than the people that she had just decided to lay off. Those are a set of upside-down priorities for any organization. Again, let alone for one that is charged with training workers with disabilities. But as far as focusing on employees with disabilities and laying only those employees off, if that is true, and it appears to be today, I think that's a larger question for the Attorney General's office. And I think it's a question that today is unanswered that, again, underscores the need for a review of the contracts from both the Department of Human Services and Central Management Services and state government.
In your view, was this an act of discrimination?
I don't feel comfortable going that far at this moment because I still think there's unanswered questions. That is quite a charge. That is quite a charge to make. But I would say this, I don't see evidence to the contrary today, but that is still an open question that is going to be answered. My role at this moment in time, I think, and dozens of other legislators share this, is to make sure that all contractual obligations from state government with Land of Lincoln Goodwill are met to the letter of that contract. That's an important question that we've asked, and we look forward to getting that answer from the administration.
One of the most grating things about what Sharon Dermotts said that really stuck in the craw of so many people who know or are friends with people with intellectual disabilities is how she degraded the value of their work and the dignity of what they do and what they bring to the workplace. There is an argument to be made that many of these people are incredibly loyal.
Yep.
They love coming to work,
Yep.
and they really enjoy it. What is the upside to other employers out there who may see people with disabilities as not, how do you help those people see them as an asset and invite them into the broader workplace?
Yeah, there's a stigma. I mean, I have my own experience with this, with my own cousin, and watching him grow up and watching him struggle. He has seen firsthand the stigma that comes with being someone with developmental disability, but who is a wonderful employee, a hard worker, and he has struggled with this. So this affects so many people in the state beyond just what has happened here in Springfield with Land of Lincoln Goodwill. It's unfortunate, I think, that it was Goodwill that exposed what happens all the time with individuals in society who have a disability and are the best workers in many cases, devoted to their jobs, and want to be part of something greater than themselves and the dignity of work. So I hope that there's some learning moments after this at some point in time, not just for the leadership at Goodwill, but for private employers, state government even in many cases, because we shouldn't be doing these things as a society. And seeing this play itself out, again, from an organization whose mission and charge is to do exactly opposite of what their actions show, I couldn't think of a worse set of circumstances today than what has unfolded in the past several days.
Yeah. We saw Senator Bernie Sanders use this story to shine a spotlight on a campaign plank of his, which is to end the federal government's sub-minimum wage policy, which allows companies and nonprofits to bring people with severe disabilities into work and pay them a piece rate, which means, okay, so for example, maybe you're blind and you can only do so much physical labor or produce so much work product per hour, and it's a lot less than somebody with full sight. That's one example. So they'll pay them at that scale.
Yeah.
Some people who advocate for people in this position say that's, even though it seems exploitative and it can be exploited, it has been exploited in some cases, by and large, that's still a benefit to that person.
Yeah.
How do you weigh such a complicated matter, and would you support either examining or going through with ending the sub-minimum wage in Illinois?
Yeah, I think so. This has been an ongoing debate. Obviously, the perfect scenario would be the federal government would deal with this on a national level. That's clearly not going to happen, unfortunately. So here's what I would support. And I think the outcome of this story and the ongoing nature of the story has highlighted this issue and has really crystallized it in very clear terms. But I think it's time that we start to phase that out. Can it be done immediately? Perhaps not. But there is value to the dignity of work for any person whatsoever. And I think the idea that the law allows for a minimum wage for individuals with disabilities is a reflection on society that none of us should support. How do we get from where we are to changing that is still an open question. But I think what has happened here in recent days and weeks with Land of Lincoln Goodwill underscores the nature that we need to have this conversation, and we need to get to a point to where we eliminate this idea that somehow someone who gets up and goes to work every day on time, does a good job, is a good employee, deserves less simply because they have a disability.
It seems like a federal policy that in fact cements and confirms the words and the spirit of what Sharon Dermotts said, that we value you less.
Yeah, it's disgusting, in my opinion, and that's coming from a personal place. So how do we change it? I think that's a tough question, but the answer is embedded in the idea that we shouldn't accept it as the way it has to be. So, we've had this occurrence now, and we've had individuals among us whose lives have been disaffected, who have had very challenging lives, whose lives now have been disaffected because of actions of a non-for-profit organization, utilizing what appears to be state resources. I would hope that at the end of this, we come to some better conclusions that better serve those individuals with disabilities who have had incredibly challenging lives, so that they have better lives at the end of the day.
And lastly, nuts and bolts on this. What power, what pressure can the Senate or can the legislature apply to scrutinize not just the contracts? Okay, we get it. They have about $400,000 in state working grants and all that. But beyond that, into the nonprofit. Is that an attorney general's job, or can you ask questions at a hearing about, for example, how many other family members might you have on your payroll?
Yeah. So I think this should serve as a lesson, frankly. When this was a bipartisan budget this year, we were able to do some things that undid the damage of the last 4 years without a budget throughout the course of almost 4 years. When we make tough choices about state resources, taxpayer dollars, to say we want to fund human service programs and give a small COLA to a rate in a particular program, that is for the intended purpose stated in the budget. It's not to pay Ms. Durbin more money. So
quite literally, this budget actually did change that.
It
this
did.
budget said you can take that 3.5% increase and apply it anywhere you want. It doesn't have to go to the staff.
Right. So, but when the line says for the stated purpose, the line in the budget, that's an explicit direction. That's an explicit direction. So I think this should serve as a warning that to non-for-profits who do good work. I don't want to lump everybody together, but when we've had the times that we've had in the state and we were able to do things like we were this year because of bipartisan cooperation, we want to make sure it gets to the right people. And I think what has occurred here has, and I can't tell you, dozens of legislators looking at this saying, wait a second here. We make tough choices. We have to take tough votes on budgets. That's our job to do. It's our job to balance resources with need. And so in this case, when we have the ability to raise rates, and this isn't just for job training for individuals with disabilities. You could point to any number of things in this budget. It can't go to the people that make $170,000. It just cannot. It cannot. It has to go to the people that it's intended to help. And so I would suspect that following this in the very near future, there will be a very swift and sizable reaction from the legislature on any number of levels.
To Goodwill specifically?
I would say maybe not to Goodwill specifically, Mark. I would say this is causing folks to step back and say, wait a second, how could this happen? This set of circumstances is just beyond anything that anybody would think is reasonable.
It sounds like you're driving at an alternative measure or some other way to. What is that?
Well, there's and it's justified because it's taxpayer funding. It's funding that comes to state government paid for by taxes from people in Illinois.
Sure. So what's the fix?
So the fix could be some type of additional oversight and contractual agreements between agencies and non-for-profits. It could be phasing out the sub-minimum wage, using rate increases. It could be any number of things. And I would tell you, just given the attention from this one non-for-profit of the thousands in the state, I would expect there to be some type of very swift and bold reaction from the legislature.
And then lastly, for whatever it's worth, what did you make of the fact that one mom sticking up for her son went viral in the way it did?
Yeah.
What does that say about the local community here in Central Illinois, how quickly they're willing to band together on something like this?
Yeah. So I think it underscores the importance of advocacy, even in the face of difficult circumstances or challenges. The importance of advocacy in our system, and that's just not state government and elective office. In this case, it's a system that is run by a non-for-profit. The importance of advocacy and speaking up to make our system better is imperative. If people don't speak up, the system never improves. It also shows me that when individuals, not just those that have been disaffected by Goodwill, but individuals in the public who never met any of these workers that were fired, see these things and they speak up, that level of accountability is imperative to a positive change. And that's what happened here. Without a mother speaking up for her son, and I would suspect that she has had to speak up for her son time and time again, too many times over the course of his life because he has a disability, which is sickening to me. But in this case, because of that love between a mother and her son, I suspect when this is all said and done, we will have positive changes to the system to lessen the chances that this happen ever again.
We often like to rag on cancel culture or boycott culture, this new phase where you punish a company, and there's this like foment in our society that we want to make sure that everybody behaves the way we think they should.
Yeah.
And it gets a little bit tedious at times, but this seemed to be one of those cases that brought about positive change.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I mean, there's still unanswered questions here.
Should she still have her job?
So I think that's an open question. I severely question her ability to lead the organization at this point. That's one reason why I've asked for the review of the contracts. That's one reason why I'm anticipating what those answers are. But I think that's a question that should be posed to the board of directors of Land of Lincoln Goodwill. Do they want someone leading an organization with hundreds of employees that does incredibly important work lead that organization in the direction that Ms. Durbin has led it? I think the answer to me is clearly no. At the same time, we have to make sure that on the legislative front we make positive changes because of what has happened here. And I'm certain, given the response and the conversations I've had with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, that we will have some type of positive outcome here. But in the case of the workers that have been disaffected because of these decisions, I wonder if any of them would want to go back to work there after the way that they were treated and talked about. I can't undo that, unfortunately. But at the same time, I think that's a good question for the board of directors. Do they want someone who has led the organization in this direction continue to lead that organization?